I'm Emily, 34 years old, and my husband Bob is 27. Although we didn't initially notice our age gap during our dating years, it became more noticeable when we decided to marry. The first time I met Bob's parents, I was struck by their rural home in the Northeast and their deeply conservative views. They were initially very resistant to our relationship due to our age difference. I vividly recall their disapproval, with comments like, "An older wife is rare, but a 7-year gap is quite significant. Can Emily even have children at her age? Won't her eggs be too old?" Such remarks could easily alienate many women. While my father-in-law was merely rude, my mother-in-law was outright hostile. She declared, "I refuse to accept this. Why does Bob need to marry someone 7 years older? It's too embarrassing to even discuss with the neighbors. He'll soon be back here to take over the family business, and with your city background, you're simply not suited to be our daughter-in-law." Bob and I had been together for 6 years, and I had devoted nearly all my late 20s to him. I was committed to marrying him, and after living together for a few years, I didn't have the energy to search for someone else. Frustrated, I pushed Bob into proposing, and he reluctantly agreed. Perhaps due to his youth or his nature, Bob seemed to prefer maintaining the status quo. When his parents opposed our engagement, he quickly changed his stance, saying, "See, I told you it was too soon to get married. We can just register our marriage later." I responded firmly, "It's not too soon. The age difference will change no matter how much time passes." Turning to his parents with a polite smile, I said, "Yes, I am older than Bob, but that's something beyond our control. I promise to do my best to prove myself as a worthy daughter-in-law. I'm not perfect, but I hope you can accept me." Although they agreed with some reluctance, Bob's sister was adamantly opposed. At our first meeting, she bluntly declared, "Just so you know, don't refer to me as your sister-in-law. It's completely unacceptable for my brother to marry someone older than me." Looking back, I realize I was naive. Despite my confidence from handling difficult clients at work, I believed I could manage the situation. I now understand what they call bride bullying. I convinced myself that moving back to the countryside to live with the in-laws was not as bad as the horror stories I had read online. I should have called off the wedding at that point, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20ths. Now, a year later, I deeply regret getting married. Although our daily life and work routines didn't change much after we registered our marriage, one major shift was the frequent phone calls Bob started receiving from his mother. I could only guess what they were about, likely questioning when we would move back home and urging him to consider divorce. Whenever Bob received calls from his mother, he would retreat to another room or the bathroom, trying to shield me from overhearing. But with our small apartment, it was impossible not to catch snippets of the conversation. I often heard phrases like, "So Emily was saying," and couldn't help but listen in. It seemed they were accusing me of opposing the idea of moving back to Bob's hometown to live with his parents, but that wasn't true. When I asked Bob about moving back, he had expressed reluctance, saying he didn't want to live somewhere without a nearby convenience store and with scarce job opportunities. It seemed he was using me as a scapegoat for his own unwillingness to return home. It was frustrating to see Bob cast me as the villain to cover up his own hesitations. Just now, I overheard Bob in the next room saying, "So if I bring up divorce, I'd have to pay alimony?" His hesitation about divorce wasn't rooted in any lingering affection for me but rather in his aversion to pain. Hearing his true feelings was disheartening. It might be time to seriously consider divorce, although we don't have children. I've begun contemplating it privately without mentioning it to anyone. Shortly after, I received an invitation to Bob's sister's wedding, prompting us to take the express train back to his family's home for the ceremony. Despite Bob being considered the heir, our wedding had been a modest family dinner, while his sister's wedding was set to be a lavish event. I wanted to fulfill my social obligations and avoid further friction, despite the disparity. The wedding was scheduled for the middle of a 3-day weekend, so Bob and I arrived at his family's home the day before. Bob's sister's family was from a neighboring city, and the wedding was to take place at a venue there, with plans for the relatives to travel by chartered bus on the day of the event. As the family home became a hub for relatives arriving in droves, the ceremony was set for just after 2 p.m. To avoid overcrowding the venue's dressing rooms, the venue staff, including dressers, came to the house. Even Bob's parents were getting dressed up. Our wedding had been a simple family dinner, so we wore slightly nicer everyday clothes. The contrast in treatment was stark and surprising. I had changed into the dress I had splurged on for the occasion, done my makeup, and was setting my hair when my father-in-law called out, "Hey Emily, could you serve some refreshments to the relatives?" With a smile, I began handing out refreshments, introducing myself with, "Nice to meet you. I'm Bob's wife. Please enjoy the refreshments." I wanted to make a strong impression, presenting myself with the confidence of a seasoned TV announcer. Despite my mother-in-law's suggestion to stay in Bob's room, I was eager to play my part and leave a positive impression. As soon as the bus arrived to take us to the wedding venue, the relatives boarded with enthusiasm. As I prepared to join them, my mother-in-law called out, "Wait a minute, Emily. I forgot the pearl necklace. Could you go get it?" "Really? In this formal dress?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "It's in the drawer on top of the dresser in my room. It's a keepsake from my mother." "Please hurry and bring it," she insisted. I agreed and quickly made my way to her room. I started rummaging through the cluttered dresser drawer. The necklace wasn't immediately visible, and with everyone else already on the bus, my anxiety began to rise. After about 5 minutes, I found a box that seemed promising. I opened it quickly and raced to the entrance, only to see that the bus had already left. The entire family, including Bob, had departed without me. "You've got to be kidding!" I exclaimed, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. The bus was nowhere in sight. I felt a surge of panic as I realized I had left my cell phone in my bag, which was now on the bus. I knew the name of the wedding venue but didn't have the phone number. Without my phone, I couldn't reach Bob, and without my wallet, I couldn't even get a taxi. I was overwhelmed with a sense of despair, but then I wondered if attending the wedding was even necessary. My enthusiasm for the event had vanished entirely. It wasn't just my first meeting with the relatives, it seemed my in-laws and Bob had noticed my absence. Their departure without me felt particularly cruel. The idea of divorce crossed my mind, but simply ending the marriage seemed too easy. I wanted revenge. After some thought, I devised a plan. I stepped outside with a calm demeanor and a smile, preparing to execute my scheme. When the relatives, in-laws, and Bob returned from the wedding around 5 p.m., they were visibly drunk. By then, I had gathered all my belongings except for the bag that had gone with them. I found a taxi company's number in a phone book next to the in-laws' home phone and called to request a taxi in 30 minutes. Everything was set. I greeted them at the bus with an innocent expression. Bob's face showed guilt when he saw me, but he remained silent. My in-laws were preoccupied with sending off the relatives and paid me little attention. The relatives glanced my way but left in their cars. I wished Bob would at least offer an apology, but that was not his style. With a forced smile, I said to Bob, "Welcome back." He looked visibly relieved and started making excuses. "I didn't realize you weren't on the bus." I felt bad, but the ceremony was starting, so I couldn't come back for you. I ignored his excuses and began searching through the luggage for my bag, silently conveying my disbelief. I turned to him and said, "Divorce? Is this some kind of joke? Because it certainly feels like one." Bob began to panic as he realized the seriousness of my words. "You're surprised you think such a petty lie would work? So what if you weren't noticed? Are you saying you forgot I existed until you saw me?" Both of his parents were disappointing. My father-in-law, after sending off the relatives, chimed in, "Come on, it was just a little forgetfulness on both sides. Bob's talking about divorce over something like this? City brides are really spineless." It seemed he was actually in favor of the divorce. My mother-in-law, upon hearing about it, smirked and said, "I knew it. A city bride just doesn't fit in. She was never right for our family." Her hypocrisy infuriated me. If that was how they felt, they should have invited Bob to the wedding alone. Why make me travel all this way? I felt a rising tide of anger as I took in their reactions. My mother-in-law's smirk and her dismissive attitude were the final straws. If they had always considered me unsuitable, why not have just let Bob come alone? Why make me go through all this, only to be met with such disdain? I looked around, still incredulous. I had endured a lot just to be part of their family, and now it seemed my presence was unwanted. I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay where I wasn't appreciated. I waited for the taxi to arrive, gathering my composure as I prepared to leave. When the taxi pulled up, I loaded my things and took one last look at the house. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness. I had hoped for a warm reception and a place where I felt valued. Instead, I was leaving behind a scene of misunderstanding and rejection. The drive to the airport was quiet, and I used the time to reflect on everything that had happened. I realized that my sense of belonging and the value of my relationship with Bob were at stake. The issues at hand weren't just about a missed bus or a forgotten necklace, they were indicative of deeper problems within the family dynamics and my relationship with Bob. Arriving at the airport, I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. I knew I had to address these issues directly, but I wasn't sure how to approach the conversation. My immediate goal was to get away from the situation, to give myself time to think and regroup. Back at home, I tried to reach Bob and the in-laws, but the conversations were strained and uncomfortable. It became clear that a deeper dialogue was necessary, one that addressed not just the mishap but the underlying tensions that had surfaced. In the end, the ordeal at the wedding became a turning point. It forced me to confront not only my feelings about the family dynamics but also the state of my marriage. It was a challenging and painful period, but it was also an opportunity for growth and understanding. I knew that moving forward would require open communication, honesty, and a reassessment of what I truly wanted from my relationship and from being part of this family. Leaving me behind was a shocking and outrageous treatment, whether someone is a city bride or a country bride. My mother-in-law's harsh words and the entire situation left me in disbelief. When I raised my voice in protest, my mother-in-law responded by saying that they had never intended to invite me in the first place. She claimed that Bob had brought me along by mistake, and as a result, we were left behind. I was taken aback by her audacity. When I glared at Bob, he quickly avoided eye contact and shifted the blame to his mother. He explained, "Well, Mom didn't explicitly say we should come alone, so I assumed it meant we could come as a couple." My mother-in-law's unreasonable anger persisted. She accused me of going around the venue, serving tea, and introducing myself as the bride, which had led to confusion among the relatives. They were asking why the wife wasn't present, not even realizing that Bob was married. This made us look foolish, according to her. She insisted that it was absurd for me to have introduced myself, as it was my own fault for creating that confusion. I countered that my effort to introduce myself as Bob's wife to the relatives had made an impact. It became evident that they never intended to acknowledge me and had planned to eventually divorce me. Their silence in response to my accusations only confirmed my suspicions. It became clear to me that severing ties with this family was the right decision. Determined to follow through with their apparent wish for a divorce, I decided to leave. I boarded the taxi that had just arrived and took the last train back to my apartment. That night, I couldn't sleep and impulsively began searching for lawyers online and packing my belongings. I kept myself busy until dawn. The next morning, I discovered several missed calls from Bob and my in-laws. It seemed that my actions had made a significant impact. After being left behind, I formulated a plan for revenge that stayed within legal and safe boundaries. I didn't want to just get a divorce and suffer silently. I wanted to make a statement. I remembered how concerned my mother-in-law was about what the neighbors thought. She had bought a surplus of refreshments and snacks for the relatives, so I decided to use them. I bagged up the leftover treats and set out into the neighborhood, greeting everyone with a smile and introducing myself as Bob's wife. I shared the details of how I had been treated and left behind on the wedding day. That evening, my mother-in-law and I had a loud argument outside, which the entire neighborhood naturally overheard. This was a perfect form of revenge for a family so concerned about their public image. Afterward, Bob and I divorced without major complications. The stories I shared were framed as casual conversations to avoid defamation lawsuits, and with the help of a lawyer, I secured a satisfactory settlement for the abandonment. As for my sister-in-law, her marriage soon fell apart. She had concealed her difficult personality to get married, but her true nature emerged, leading to a swift divorce within 6 months. By then, the incident of my abandonment had become a notorious rumor. The in-laws developed a reputation as a vile family that mistreated their daughter-in-law, leading to a much more subdued existence. Bob's prospects of finding a new bride in his hometown seemed bleak. I learned this from a neighbor I had befriended and exchanged phone numbers with. The divorce felt like a new beginning for me. I regretted not recognizing Bob and his family's true nature sooner, but now I had a clearer perspective. Perhaps I should have withdrawn immediately when faced with their initial opposition, but I was young and naive. Despite the pain, I now view the past year as a valuable lesson for my future. I am relieved to have resolved the situation and moved on. With the divorce finalized and my life starting to reorient, I focused on rebuilding my future. I used the newfound clarity from this experience to guide my decisions and relationships. The ordeal with Bob and his family had been a harsh lesson in recognizing the signs of toxicity and understanding my own worth. I threw myself into my work and personal interests, rediscovering passions I had set aside during the tumultuous period of my marriage. I also made an effort to reconnect with old friends and family members, rekindling relationships that had been strained or neglected. Their support played a crucial role in my healing process. As time passed, I found solace in the normalcy of everyday life and began to feel more secure in my choices. The bitterness of the past gradually gave way to a sense of empowerment. I became more discerning in my interactions, learning to set clear boundaries and to prioritize my well-being. The negative reputation of Bob and his family seemed to serve as a cautionary tale for others in the community. While it was never my intention to ruin their lives, their actions had repercussions that affected their social standing. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their attempts to salvage their reputation were largely unsuccessful. Despite the drama, I didn't let it define me. Instead, I used the experience as a catalyst for personal growth. I engaged in activities that enriched my life, sought out new opportunities, and cultivated a more positive outlook. The challenges I faced helped me develop resilience and a deeper understanding of what I wanted from my relationships and my life. Reflecting on the past, I recognized that my decision to leave and move on was ultimately a step towards a more fulfilling and authentic existence. The scars of the experience remained, but they were reminders of my strength and the lessons I had learned. In the end, I realized that moving on was not just about escaping a difficult situation but about embracing a new chapter with hope and determination. The future, while uncertain, was now full of possibilities that I was eager to explore.